R&D, John Sweeney. John, welcome to the SolidWorks 2023 launch episode of SolidWorks Live.
Hey, Sean. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, John, before we get into all that's new in SolidWorks 2023, and truly we will get to that, we wanted to kick things off with you and Bruce Holloway, who we'll hear from in a second. You guys are both longtime leaders within SolidWorks R&D. So, wanted to ask you for our audience sake, what have been some overall, development focus areas over the past few years for you and your teams?
Yeah, sure. In R&D, we tend to have three kind of general inputs or focus that where we get our development work from. One being, customer enhancements, and Bruce is going to go a little bit into that later. And that might be, from enhancing what we have today, delighters, workflow improvements. And the second being innovation, things that we feel change the game. And a lot of that work has been centered the last few years around our delivery of SolidWorks integrated with the platform, trying to extend what we have today, with all the power of the platform. And then the third bucket we're seeing here, a slide, the quality and performance. Very large focus on this the past few years. Again, largely by customer feedback that they want us to focus more on, the bugs that they've reported. So we've had a 90% drawdown. So over the past 12 months, it's been a 90% reduction of the customer backlog of bugs, with a goal for the rest of this year, for the end of this year, another 25% further reduction, and a nice goal of 0 customer crash bugs in the backlog. So that's the target for the end of this year, and we're well on the way. I mean, we're nipping at the goal right now.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, so yeah, I joined SolidWorks a few years ago, and just to see that chart and the way you often like to see the hockey stick growth in trajectory, but it's not one of those types of charts, right?
Yeah.
We want to be going down, and John, one thing I wanted to mention, and we hear this a lot, right? Anyone who's tuned in to how we've been trending, right, in terms of our development, you might hear that term 3D experience. And our audience here, and really anyone who will view our What's New content, they're going to see a lot of examples of new functionality as shown inside 3D Experience SolidWorks. And I want to spend some time, and I think duly so, just talking about what exactly it is that we're seeing and saying when it comes to 3D Experience SolidWorks. So, first of all, let me just ask you plainly, when you talk about all these great things that R&D is focusing on these days, are you talking about exclusively working on these things for 3D Experience SolidWorks users?
So I guess the short answer is no. So fundamentally, the core, the CAD product, the SolidWorks that everyone's familiar with, is the same, right? So if we are adding an enhancement or fixing a bug, it goes into all our deliveries, so to speak. SolidWorks Desktop or SolidWorks connected 3D Experience version.
Sure. And to be, I think, even more specific with this, right? While we have everyone's attention, let's just ask another, like a very simple question. Are SolidWorks and 3D Experience SolidWorks the same? How, just pragmatically, how should I be thinking of this question if I'm say a SolidWorks user, right, or a VAR partner?
I think, again, fundamentally, the CAD product, the design product that you're familiar with is the same, but 3D Experience SolidWorks brings some changes, largely around licensing and install. You can install from the platform, and that, with people working from home and working from the office now, there's a huge benefit there that you can, go home, log into the platform, and it'll install SolidWorks for you. Your license is usable at home, and you get immediate access to your files, right? So they're on the cloud. So that's a huge benefit, a big, change essentially. And then, with the platform, it's all about extending what we can provide our customers. So, the platform gives us, countless apps, the power of everything DS to can generate. So high-end simulation with Simulia, countless manufacturing apps, and what the video we just saw, collaboration. So, the ability to collaborate on your designs from any device. So that's really kind of extending what we don't do today in Solidworks, the desktop product.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great way of thinking about it. Before we kick it over to Bruce here, what is your parting message? You see it on YouTube and on LinkedIn. We have swaths of people here to hear what's new in SolidWorks 2023. What's your parting message or your call to action for SolidWorks users when it comes to the performance and stability ends of the software itself?
Yeah, I guess, just simply that, everything we do, our goal is to help our customers be more productive and to, help their businesses create products. So we need to hear from you, right? So, if you have feedback, whether it's enhancements, if you have bugs, let us know about it. Again, you saw the earlier numbers, our backlogs are dramatically down. Crash bugs will be zero in a matter of, weeks or months here. So if you have feedback, please let us know. And again, our goal is really to make, the customer successful.
Wow. I can say just candidly, I'm very excited for next year's episode already to have you back on and just to, kind of update ourselves on the progress and hear what's going on. But John, whether I'm walking into your office during a Waltham walk-in like I did during 3D Experience World, or we're just chatting virtually as we often do these days, it's always a joy to hear from you, and always a joy to have you on SolidWorks Live.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Awesome. So again, we're going to be hearing, we heard from John. Now we're going to hear from Bruce Holloway, another longtime leader in SolidWorks R&D. Bruce, how are you doing today?
Great, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's always great to hear from you guys. So Bruce, we just heard from John, right? We heard John talk a lot about some of our internal ambitions, when it comes to our dedication to performance and stability. And, when it comes to those areas, as well as, of course, the focus of today, new features and functionality that we're going to be seeing momentarily, how is R&D deciding what to work on?
Yeah, it's a good question, because we're always trying to make SolidWorks better, but we strive to make it better in the ways that are most important to our users. So it all begins by listening to users, and every user is unique. So we have to listen to all the users, and we have many techniques. I mean, we have our enhancement request site. We'll get over 1,000 enhancements. You can see we track everyone in that graphic there, going back for many years, but we keep track of what areas they're coming in on and what the trends are, which ones are the latest and which ones are the older ones. We track all of that data. But we listen in many other ways too. Sometimes we actually watch the forums to see where users are struggling, and that gives us inspiration for where we need to focus on future enhancements.
And Bruce, I just to interrupt for a second, if we could show this graphic that I have up on my end here, just this example of enhanced. Yeah, I mean, just to stay here for a bit. I mean, you guys are considering just an overwhelming amount of data, right? So,
Yeah.
If you're wondering if your voice is heard, there are many voices, and certainly they're being processed and respected.
Everyone is tracked. Every enhancement is tracked and accounted for. And yes, and it's kind of mixed in with the others, so we can see the trends. We can see the heat maps of where the most demand is to improve the product. So yeah, we invest quite a bit of effort in doing this. Like I say, but we'll look other places. We visit customers face to face. We love to see them in their own environment. Nothing better than them showing us what they make and then showing us the software. But we're always meeting with them, whether it's user groups, whether it's at World, whether them coming here. We love that face-to-face interaction with customers. And I should say that every enhancement that we put into the product gets alpha tested. And what we do is we put the customers in front of the product, and we stand behind them, and we ask them, we challenge them to do something in the product that requires them to use this area where we've just enhanced. And then we sit back and we watch and we bite our lips not to talk because we watch them struggle and try to find something, and we ask them to speak what they're thinking. And some of them are great. They sit and they go, well, I'm looking around. I can't really, there's something interesting here. So we love them when they verbalize what they're thinking. We learn a tremendous amount, and we're able to refine the product before it goes out. So that's another great technique. But
yeah, absolutely. I just, I think we have a clip here of a recent event. I'm so excited about these sorts of things. If we could show, this one right here. I missed out on this. I was bummed. Talked to so many user group leaders who were out to do, this sort of thing, right? Connect face to face and see how users actually aim to use the software, right? And you'll see 3D Experience SolidWorks being used there. Surely testing core SolidWorks functionality within that. But you guys, we mentioned so many different inputs, but this in-person interaction, like GP said in that sort of beginning video, we're trying to get back to that. And there's so many things you can pick up in person. I'm sure within your role in R&D that can be a little bit harder to do digitally. Like, seeing the different mannerisms and how people go about things. I just think that's so impressive.
Oh, absolutely. But the in-person interactions, we learn a tremendous amount, and we just get some great camaraderie too with the users. We're always trying to make their job easier, and they're trying to communicate to us how it can be done. So it's great interaction. I would also say that we listen to our tech support people. We listen to the VARs, the AEs. They're interacting with customers all the time, so they can sometimes see trends because they interact with many customers and in their domain. So that all comes back to us, and we use that to structure the next set of enhancements.
Absolutely. We'll be talking a lot about VAR events and what you can sort of get in store there over the coming months throughout this episode. But, we talked, Bruce, just sticking to this topic of how you guys operate in R&D, about how you have so much information, right? And that's a great thing. But I know we can all agree, wherever you work and whichever department you work in any company, any task or project that you have to dedicate yourself to, prioritization of that data or those tasks or those projects, that's a huge deal. And, I'm sure these things, right, like anything, it becomes more important at great scale. So, how is R&D, with you guys, how are you prioritizing what you work on and what are the real driving forces there?
Yeah, we have a technique, we call it QFD. I don't know if you have that graphic there, but we essentially use a numerical technique where we try to rate the value to the user on multiple criteria for each potential enhancement idea. So it could be one of the obvious things: how many hits did we get on this? How many people are interested in it? But also the value, how much is it going to save them time if we implement it? How discoverable will it be? How's the ease of use? Many criteria. So you can see we calculate them all, and we sum them up, and gives us a heat map of the things that we are rising to the top that we want to focus on for that release. And again, the objective in all this is to add the most value for the most customers.
Sure. That's a great way of looking at it. And I think all of us could agree, right? That is an optimal way of going about business. And it's interesting, even just looking at this graphic, I know, some of the stuff we had to sort of blur out just because we're trying to keep some things fresh and new for you guys when we unveil them. But just getting an idea of your process, even looking out, right? So we can see the ideas pipeline, which is powered through 3D Swim. We're using that internally, right, in R&D.
Yes.
And we see 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. So we're talking about 2023 today. We got, 2024, of course, in the future. So, working within many release cycles. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special video podcast style edition of SolidWorks Live. Actually, on some of our recent streams, we've noticed that as many as 85% of our viewers, aka
all of you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel somehow. I have no idea how that is. If you're a fan of these episodes of SolidWorks Live, if you're a fan of live design, if you're a fan of manufacturing live, you enjoy the content that we've produced. Well, first of all, on a serious note, thank you for tuning in. But secondly, hit the subscribe button. Here's the official pitch, right? Become one of the almost 200,000 people who have clicked or pressed that little red button and the notification bell next to it. It's the easiest way to keep up with what we're doing here at SolidWorks. So on that note, last month, we held our biggest virtual event of the year, What's New in SolidWorks 2023. We had on some of our best and brightest on the SolidWorks and 3D Experience Works teams to showcase the super exciting new features inside of SolidWorks Desktop and 3D Experience SolidWorks alike. So we were covering everything from the best of parts in SolidWorks 2023 to assemblies in SolidWorks 2023 to visualize and much, much more. And we also got to hear from some of our longtime leaders in R&D. And in this episode, we're going to give you more access and more exposure to R&D with a first of its kind behind the SolidWorks scenes episode with our user experience team. So with that, I will welcome to my newfound podcast stage, Mr. Kevin Berni, user experience director for SolidWorks. Kevin, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm really excited to be here on apparently my second time on a SolidWorks Live event.
It's funny you say that because I was looking, I was like, because it's always interesting when you have anyone, right? Anyone on live design or SolidWorks Live, because you're thinking, at some point I was super camera shy, which sounds weird because, we're constantly on camera now, but I was very camera shy. I remember I took a public speaking course in college. I was petrified. But I was looking you up actually, and I found this was like I think this was pre SolidWorks Live, like before SolidWorks Live was even a thing. I found a clip of you with Jeremy. I think it was, and we were talking about this off camera just now, but I think it was SolidWorks World 2018, or it might have even been 2017.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But you seemed like a natural. You seemed like you were having fun. So I was heartened by that.
I felt a little bit like Ricky Bobby, like where do I put my hands? But other than that, yeah, I thought it went pretty good.
That's always the thing. It's funny. It's funny that the way that we do these things, like it's interesting. Even looking at like your camera box and mine, like you have to, like I've taken like little classes on this stuff, but like you're supposed to like try to get your hands in the frame, but it's sometimes like depending on the framing, it's like a little bit awkward. It's like I'd never actually talk, like if you could see my full body right now, it's very strange. I'm like condensing myself and trying to gesticulate, trying to talk, trying to be emphatic and into it. But no, super excited to have you on. For those of us who in the audience who don't know you very well, though, just tell us, just for starters, who are you? Tell us a little bit about your history in the SolidWorks community.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, it all started probably 2002 when I got out of college. I started a company making data center air conditioners, and I was doing all of the service manuals for them. So I had to create like lots of illustrations about how to take apart a really big air conditioning unit.
Wow.
And so it's funny. I wish I had Composer at the time, because what we would do is take like
sounds like it.
I'd basically go into SolidWorks, hide a bunch of stuff, create a drawing view, spit that out, trace it in Illustrator to create like a line graphic, and then use that in our manual. So it was a pretty terrible process. And then I took the training and I helped with the exam testing for that product, and I was like, oh my god. Like, number one, they probably could have replaced a couple of people with this because it was so easy to use. So it was kind of funny. But yeah, I did that for a couple of years. I got this reputation of being kind of annoying about how it could be easier to tear down these units and how it could be easier to program these units. And they were like, hey, well, why don't you do something about it? So kind of that's how I got started in user experience. I went to grad school here in Boston, and then In 2009, I answered one tweet about a contract user research position at Solidworks. And I've been here ever since. So I contracted for a year. Interesting story. On my first full day of work as a full-time employee, I called in sick because that was the day my first daughter was born.
Okay.
Yep. I showed up a day or two later to sign up for the health insurance. Just, it seemed kind of important at the time. But yeah, I've been here ever since. I mean, this is an amazing place. It's an amazing team. The customers are awesome. We were joking around before about like, maybe not joking, but the last 2 years have been kind of weird because that's kind of the best part of the job is talking with the customers and seeing what people are making with the software that we work on every day. So I think most people might know me from World. I used to coordinate all of our user research studies and things that we did at World. So interact with a lot of people, just trying to get people into sessions and trying out the software. And then over time, I switched into the design world when Jim Wilkinson retired, deservedly, to go climb mountains in 2018. To take over the group. So
that was awesome.
So here I am. Yep.
Super cool. And by the way, if you guys see me just kind of looking down at seemingly a table or my shoes, I'm not. I'm looking at my phone because I have the live chat on my phone. If you guys have, again, this is very much kind of flowing podcast style episode. We have user submitted questions in a section of this episode as well. But if you guys free flowing, this is live. If you guys have questions, funny comments of your own, funny stories, maybe a session you've had with Kevin that you wanted to harken back to, feel free to let us know. We're looking right now in the YouTube chat. But yeah, it's interesting. That was interesting. You said you took a sick day. Your first day was a sick day.
Yep.
And then you have to look at the health insurance thing. But it's like I have 2 kids. We have 2 kids of our own. Definitely a time to take a sick day, but I hope you weren't sick on that day. That's what I was thinking. Like,
no. We just
a terrible day to be sick.
We were up at 4 a.m, so it was kind of off racing to the hospital.
Absolutely. So you've kind of had the other thing I wanted to ask you just from a humorous perspective is, do you remember you said you replied to a tweet? Do you remember what the tweet was comprised of? Like, did you just like, I don't even think we had emojis back then, so you couldn't have just done like a hand raise, like I'm in, like I want to be here.
Yeah, no. So it was from a colleague of mine who I actually went to grad school with. Believe it or not, I think it was at South by Southwest in Austin.
Okay, that conference.
When I saw it, and I used to hang out with a lot of web guys. I had my own consulting business, so like it kind of had to be on Twitter, like 2007, 2008, to just run in that crowd.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was not a link. I think that might even been before like Bitly and the link shorteners, or maybe right around that time is when they came out. But there was no link, there was no nothing. It was just like, hey, ask me for more information. And then, when I got back, I was at an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet with Wilkie and Tom. Which, if you know anything about Jim Wilkinson, like he loves a good all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet for lunch. So that was my interview. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's super casual, super informal. Hopefully it made you feel. I've had similar experiences where it's like literally interview at a restaurant. And it's like, I didn't know this was happening, or like, but that is cool because it probably did make you feel a little bit more at ease. But yeah, you've had a long journey here at Solidworks. So you've been around a while. Solidworks changed a lot. A lot of ways it's the same. A lot of ways it's changed, but when we think about, the focus of this episode, right, it's user experience. So, I kind of joked when, I don't know if you saw, I was with Mark Peterson in the last episode, and I said, this idea or this topic or this sort of subject that we're under, topic area that we're under of user experience, what's new in user experience in the software in 2023. It's kind of, you chuckle almost because it's like UX is so ubiquitous, it's so universal, it's such a really high level term. For those of us listening in the audience, what does the UX team at Solidworks do, and How's the UX team integrated into R&D?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, we've long had the that title in the what's new section called user experience.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of made people think, well, that means user interface. It's only user interface. And we really do a lot more than that, right? So, I think Manish likes to summarize it as, we make the complex simple, right? He's kind of given me a tagline. But I think, at our heart, we're kind of a design and research group that exists within the larger R&D community. So, a lot of what we do is about talking to customers and understanding them, not just like listening and saying, talking to one individual customer and hearing them say, I need this, do this, and then we go and do it. But it's like trying to aggregate all of that, gain insights from it, and figure out things that are going to be useful for everybody that has to use SolidWorks. So I like to think that we applied to we're focused on how is the software going to work? How are the workflows put together that you're going to use to create the awesome products that you guys create, right? You don't necessarily buy SolidWorks to use our UI, right? You use it to create some product, some good in the world. So I think we do that through lots of user research. We're going to be plugging that at the end. Signing up for we do a lot through 3D Experience World, and this year. The last few years, because we've done so much virtual, we've actually been able to really expand our footprint there. So we have lots of opportunities, even if you're not going to be at World, you can still, sign up and test with us, try out things. We do most of it under NDA, but we have people try out things. And, it's a way for us to get users' eyes on it before it gets released, before it gets out to the world. So we do a lot of that. There's an iterative design process. Many of you are, as engineers and designers, you're probably used to. We do a lot of discovery work, trying to understand workflows, understand needs. Concept design, lots of prototypes, sketching, that sort of thing, and just trying out ideas and throwing a lot of work away because, it's not good enough for whatever reason. And then detailed design, right? So we're working with product definition, the R&D teams to make sure that we get good specs that, so that the final product that gets developed and it's, easy to understand. So, and then lots of validation testing on the other end too, right? Testing with users with even shipping product to make sure that what we've done is performing the way that we wanted. We do have some other folks too. We have some visual designers that do icons and all of the kind of look and feel stuff, make sure that we're consistent. That sort of thing as well. So it's a good sized group. And we span every product that SolidWorks puts out, right?
That's why I was kind of chuckling, because I was like, wow, that's just so much. There's so much that goes into it. And for so many different use cases, that's one of the things that I was talking with Bruce about in the last episode, that we're definitely listening to our users and taking users' input and their wants and needs, right, as we develop our products. But there's just so much there in terms of use cases, in terms of amount of users, and in terms of how you gather information. Historically, this is one thing I've wondered, what have been, because all this stuff, there is certainly a degree of difficulty, but what have been some of the hardest types of UX problems to solve?
Yeah. I think they're probably the ones that are like compound problems, right? So when you start to put together things that are wrapped up in it's a technical problem, it's a really complex domain, and there's a UI problem, maybe there's some things mixed in with performance and the feedback the software is giving. So there's a lot of threads to unravel to really understand what it is that's causing it, what it is that we need to chase down, right? So, I think, the early days, I felt like, maybe this wasn't always true, but in the early days, I always felt like we were dealing with okay, we have to add variable radius fillet. How do we do that? And that seemed to be contained, right? You had a pretty good problem space to work within. We could have some good examples. of geometry that we wanted to create, and we could mess around with, helping people get to that point. I feel like,
but even something,
Yep.
not to cut you off, but like that definitely piqued my interest. I mean, that seems like that would be challenging as well, right? Because like you said, as an example, variable radius fillet. If anyone's used the variable radius fillet tool, mention it in the chat. But I, adding additional functionality, additional buttons, additional options, to match how the user might intend to use that and access it. When there can be so many different ways to add a fillet, or so many different types of fillets that you may want to add. Even that seemingly, maybe to some, the small example kind of underscores a bit of what we were saying about just how much has to go into, how much thought, how much research, and all that goes into it.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, you do need to understand what people are trying to do with it now, what we hope they're going to try to do with it in the future. And then also look at what's there currently, look at consistency. We want to add different, different inputs to it. How have we done that in other places in the software? Like we do have a design library and a design system that where we document all that stuff, and we go back and go against checklists to make sure that new stuff kind of complies with that. But yeah, it's that next level where there's not such an easy guide, and you really have to kind of push the boundaries and understand, like, okay, maybe we design it this way if we had unlimited computing power, but we don't. So how do we make it better, right? At least right away. And how do we make it better without making it a 7-year journey for the development team? So I'd say like things like detailing mode, and some of the stuff we're doing now with large design review for assemblies, like where you open things up in LDR mode, and then we're kind of resolving stuff automatically as you use it. Like we're kind of working in that direction. And I think those are the kinds of problems that are the trickiest to solve, right? Because there's so many moving parts to it. And there's a lot of uncertainty about what we can accomplish, technically. So those tend to be like pretty tough too. Like, and when you get into the idea of something like an assembly or a drawing, it could be of anything, right? So having good examples to work from and try to understand, what are people actually going to do when they get out with it in the real world? Those are the trickiest.
Yeah. So it's kind of a balance, right? Because like you said, there's that aspect where you're getting feedback, and then there's also the aspect where you have to design something, and you have to make something that's new or improved or enhanced, or just net new, like it just never existed before, and you have to try to make that match an intended level of experience for users that maybe in mass, of course, have not by nature have not tried the thing that you're making yet. So when it comes to though that input, that user input and the feedback piece, like how does your team use user feedback? Like it's very important that everyone knows, like we're constantly listening, we want it, but how does your particular team use user feedback? And what's, I guess another way of saying it is like what is the importance of user feedback in terms of what we're doing in Solidworks R&D from your perspective?
I mean, it underpins everything we do, right? So I think last time you had Bruce and John on, Bruce Holloway, talking about how we do enhancement requests and how we track every single enhancement that customers submit to us, how we do a QFD process, which is basically like a weighted criteria matrix most first year engineering students would be familiar with, to try to figure out which enhancements people are asking for. And that's really on that like front end, like what should we do piece. But I think throughout all of it, we have different phases of design. So there's kind of discovery activities where we're not necessarily chasing a particular project, but we kind of need to gain empathy for what users are trying to do. And we'll use that information later when it comes to a project. You're like, oh, wait, I remember I talked to this customer. They were struggling with this problem. I think it applies to this. Let's think about this more carefully. So, we we were talking earlier, like customer visits, going out, seeing what people are struggling with, seeing their shops, seeing the products that they're working on. I mean, those are big pieces. I think also then we get into like testing of designs, right? So when we get to the level of having a prototype, or we get to the level of having some working code like we do with alpha testing, we put it in front of people and we see what happens, right? And sometimes we find out, oops, that's really not going to work, and we go back to the drawing board. But I'd rather do that early, right? It's a lot cheaper to do that with an Adobe XD prototype or something than it is to an SP3 for instance.
That's one of the things, like even myself, like developing, different teams I've been on, I've developed, little apps that could be used, for productivity purposes. And even at that scale, it's like you think, and it's not something that's crucial. And it's like, oh, you're just doing it proactively. And it's like a little utility to make something easier for your team. You can find very quickly that the way that you design something, and the intention and the idea of how that person will use something, it can be very different than how they use it in practice. Like that, that is insane. Especially doing that at scale. And one thing you said, like pretty early on, and what you just, and everything you just mentioned there, was that really stuck out to me, is that you're looking to develop a sort of sense of empathy, which I don't think people, I wouldn't predict that people commonly think of that in terms of, or in the realm of software development. At least if you're a common user of a piece of software, like if I'm a Windows user, right? Thinking of the developers that develop Windows, like thinking about them having empathy for my experience. But I've found personally, like on the technical side, it's interesting, talking to our customers, it's much easier, it's much more effective when you can develop that sense of empathy, when you can be with the user and you can see a challenge or an ambition that they have, to be able to develop or find a solution for that. So I loved how you said that.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, it gets into, we have all kinds of interactions with people, and it's like why I love World, because it kind of puts together a lot of users in one place. But, a couple of years ago, there's a guy named Devin Hamilton. He's got a company called Wrapped Adapt. I think they're in upstate New York. I think we've featured him on a few things. I think he has cerebral palsy. And he reached out to us about like things about mouse gestures and using the mouse gesture ring, and for people who might have different physical abilities, what it's like to try to use that mouse gesture ring or try to use the keyboard. And so, engaging with customers like that they're doing amazing work, and they're doing it with they're using different adaptive technologies to try to be able to still do all the, you still have to get all the inputs into the software, right? So, we looked at changing up some things with mouse gestures based on some of that feedback. We've also, sometimes it's simple things too, like repetitive stress injuries and people trying to use the mouse, like, fine motor skills. We can't take for granted that people can, use a mouse pointer as effectively as you can when you're 17, right? So even that are things that we're constantly looking to understand and get better empathy towards. Solidworks isn't so great at things like screen readers, but things like some of the platform applications and X design stuff, we've kind of started to look at like, okay, well, people with visual impairments, people with hearing impairments, how do you make sure that we're kind of accounting for design for them as well? But then usually the improvements we make actually help everybody, right? So one of the fine motor things we had was the rollback bar in the feature manager tree. It was really tough to grab. And
at
so
some point.
now it's better for everybody as a result of some of those conversations. So it's interesting. One, it's really important to just understand what everybody's trying to do, what challenges they have, but then those things all kind of come back and benefit everybody. So that's even better, right?
That was that was an area where you can really tell, with any piece of software, but in this case SolidWorks, you can really tell and I always use this term very affectionately, the nerds, right? In terms of us here in the user base. I remember when that changed, right? When the rollback bar, like I'd never seen just the changing of a line width cause so much happiness in a user base is when that happened in a rollback bar. And it has to be kind of a nice moment because you're in R&D, right? Because it's like, oh, this idea, like the rollback bar is great. Like we've developed something that people really like, really find value in or using a lot. So that's great. And it's like they just want to be able to use it, access it a little bit easier. And that's a really cool example. Like you said, it's I'm really interested in disability, and it's one of those things where people. I'm reading a book based on disability right now, and this idea that anyone can become disabled in some way at any time. It's one of those unique things in life. You can become disabled in some form, in some way at any point in time. And I think a lot of people maybe don't think about that, and hopefully won't have to, at least from a first person standpoint in some ways, until they need to. But the point that you made, and I know Devin as well, but the point that you made when you're adding things to help individuals, to help make the software in some ways a bit more accessible for all, you are indeed doing that. Maybe it's inspired out of a case where you're helping a disabled population in some way or attempting to, but it winds up helping the broader user base, which I think is actually a really, really nice effect.
Yeah. I mean, that's I think the technical term is universal design, but we want to make sure that I mean, human beings have a broad range of abilities, right? You don't even necessarily need to think of it as disability, right? It's just people can do different things. People have different challenges. So trying to gain that empathy and take that into account, I think makes a better software product.
100%. Now you mentioned Worlds. We flashed on the stream a bit ago, your site for your team, User Experience, right? Solidworks.com/usability. So just to stay on that point for a bit, what are the ways your team is gathering feedback? We talked about World, talked about the usability site, but just overall, like just across the gamut, how is your team gathering feedback?
Yeah. So a lot of Zoom, right? That's a
lot of Zoom. Yeah, we were talking about that.
2020 on, we've done a lot of Zoom. But we do a variety of things, right? So we do, in the old days, we did a lot of customer visits, going out and talking, seeing shops, that sort of thing. But it's pretty universal, right? And it's based on interviews and discussions and sometimes trying things out, right? So we'll do Zoom interviews with customers one-on-one just to talk about their usage of the product, right? So I'm engaged right now in a series of those, just talking to people about some of the different products, what their experiences are. We don't have any specific agenda. It's like, hey, okay, you're using this. How's it going? What are you struggling with? I have a script, I have some questions, but I'm really just letting the customer drive it. What's important to them? Because just learning what they want to talk about is useful in and of itself. We'll do some that are a little more targeted for discovery, right? We are looking at some new features or a new area we want to get into. So we try to go out and look at our database of people and see hey, okay, here's people that are involved in electrical design or people doing structural work that we want to ask more about a specific domain. And that's usually in our discovery process. Once we get to where we have concepts and designs and that sort of thing, we'll do more of usability testing. So that's you're helping us test an early version of the product. So we typically use a protocol called Think Out Loud, which is exactly what it sounds like, where we say, okay, great, we're going to have you try some things. I'll have some tasks that I want people to try out. I'll give them control of my screen with that prototype or with that early build version of SolidWorks and say, okay, try to build this part now. And while you do it, tell me what you're looking at, tell me what you're thinking, tell me what's annoying you, tell me what you wish you were seeing. We get a lot of great stuff out of that, because it helps us understand, just that gives us a peek inside the mind of the engineer that's trying to work on that particular thing. And these are all pretty painless. Most customers and most of the folks that do this with us are like, they love doing it because it gives them kind of a sneak preview, and you get to feel like, often that feedback goes right back in, right? We're working on it with R&D right then. So sometimes changes get made very quickly through that. So yeah, I mean, we do all kinds of other stuff too. We send out surveys throughout the year to help us kind of, answer big questions. But yeah, those are the main ways. It's a lot of direct interaction.
Yeah, it's there's a lot I was interested in what you just mentioned, because it's interesting. You might, I know sometimes, and I do that. I'm still guilty of this at times, where you're going into a context where you're looking to survey individuals. Whether it's it's for developing software or really anything, and you might have all the things that you think you need to know, right? All the time. It's like, I have all of my questions. I know exactly what I need to ask. I know exactly the sorts of inputs I need to get. And I'm sure that seems helpful for some types of surveys, some types of, information gathering events or initiatives, but it's not. And it's great to hear that. It's funny. It reminds me, some of what you just mentioned reminds me of when I would teach classes on SolidWorks, and you would sort of see, the route that especially beginner users whether it's beginner users in sheet metal or weldments or whatever it was at that given time, when they would look to go to do something naturally, you get to sort of see that firsthand experience of, how do I expect to do something? Like you said, what is annoying me right now? Or on the other hand, do I just get it right away? And it matches what my expectation would be. And yeah, I think it's very cool that, like you said, users have the opportunity to do that, and directly with, the software developer. In this case, it would be us, right? SolidWorks. And that's one of the joys. If for anyone listening, if you go to solidworks.com/usability, that's giving you a great sort of open window to be able to do that. And you also mentioned, Kevin, and we've mentioned a few times now, right? But 3D Experience World being a great place where we have, thousands of members of our user community come, and stay for a few days. And, in this case, this year, this upcoming event will be in Nashville. And you get to spend face-to-face time, and be able to have those interactions. For those of you listening, by the way, you can register for 3D Experience World today. Like, registration is open. I know February seems like it's so far away. It's October, right? But you can register today. It's set to be a hybrid event, right? So physical, in person, right? In person again, as well as virtual. And, you guys will be surely playing huge parts, as you mentioned, Kevin, as you've been doing for years.
Yep. And you can participate through the virtual event too, right? So we've kind of adapted, and so we do quite a bit of in-person stuff, but also, for the team members that don't end up going to Nashville, they're going to be doing virtual sessions. Usually we try to do like the week before, the week after, some during, but we kind of spread out the time frame a little bit because it's virtual. We can do that. But yeah, I mean, we will probably run 20, 25 different user research studies. So, 25 different projects that we're either gathering information on or testing, alpha testing, usability testing, just during that time period. So that's a lot of individual sessions, maybe 200 or so, maybe more, with individual users. So so we need as many people that want to get involved as possible, and there's lots of opportunities. When you sign up for a World, there's a checkbox that says, yes, I'd love to give feedback to R&D. Make sure you check that. That's how we get in touch.
Awesome. Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I think, I used to run the SolidWorks Champions program, and it's amazing. I think at this point, over 60 countries worth of users are represented in the program. I think there are something around 700, 800 plus champions at this point. It's truly a worldwide program. And, you think about World, 3D Experience World, we've traditionally thought of it as, and this year all the same, right? You're able to go in person, right? But we have this virtual aspect. And for those who can't travel, can't get away from work, maybe are far away from Nashville, Tennessee in the US, but still want to make your mark on the software and still want to sort of have your voice heard and, understand all this stuff a bit better as well. I think that's such a great opportunity that was spurred by, like you said, the Zoom days that we at some points, I'm sure over the past few years, we're like, I just want to see a real person and I just want to talk to a real person, actual, at an actual physical event. But it's cool to see that we've adapted, we've made changes, and we're just being, extra accommodating.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's not to say we don't have unique opportunities at, live events. And in fact, we did something with user group leaders a couple of weeks ago here in Waltham, where we did this like massive, multiple people working together, doing collaborative tasks, trying to use SolidWorks Connected. And that was kind of the first time we'd done that. They were like working together on design challenges and sending stuff back and forth through the software. So we're constantly trying to innovate on how we do things, and maybe try to simulate a little more real world situations with some of the testing that we do, just to try to get a better insight on things. So yeah, there's plenty of opportunities either way you go. Love to see people in person at World too, but it's, the world is what it is. So there'll be opportunities for both.
For sure. So we've talked about, a lot of different ways, right? We just talked about that, a lot of different ways that you can make your voice heard as a user. But, at an anecdotal level, like, do you have any, just thinking like any stories that you can share of user feedback, directly influencing, say like the introduction of a new feature in SolidWorks?
Yeah, I mean, I have a ton. Bruce isn't lying when he says everything we do, we put in front of customers first, right? So, I think the mouse gesture story is a good one. We kind of came out with that. We listened to people talk about it for a little bit, then we came back and revamped how you did the customization of it. We revamped how the gesture rings worked a little bit, some of that feedback from Devin. I think another good place is just over time, like a couple of years ago, we added that like assembly loading dialogue that popped up that told you like, hey, here's how long it took to load this assembly last time. And just kind of like broke down the different steps in the assembly loading process. Like, okay, we're resolving, we're doing the graphics, we're building the graphics now, we're solving the mates now. Just to make it feel like you're not just sitting there staring at it and is it hung or frozen, and so over time we got a lot of feedback over the years about that, and like we did a lot of research to understand like what does it mean when a SolidWorks customer says that the software is hung, or that that it's frozen or that it crashed, and we learned a lot about what people's perceptions were, and we found out that some cases those were quite different than what we thought. We're like, oh, the kernel's running something. Obviously it's, just going to sit there, like, but just that fact of like telling people like, hey, SolidWorks is still running. We're doing something. And when we can, like, how long should you wait? Like, we joke around, there's kind of like 3 waiting periods, right? There's, blink, right? Take a second, read an email, whatever. There's go get a cup of coffee, and then there's come back tomorrow, right? Like I'm running a big simulation or something.
Never really thought of it that way, but
I come back overnight, right? Like this is gonna take a long time. Go to a meeting. And so just giving that sense of like, what can I expect where we can, like we obviously there's some things we're not always great at, and sometimes we actually did hang or crash. So hopefully less and less. And John's talked about how we've really kind of made a lot of progress on that backlog of crash bugs. But yeah, I mean, just those things alone, right? It took us a while. Like we would hear all these terms, and we actually went out and did some surveys, did some research, and quantified them to get a better understanding. And that really helped us kind of hone in on those projects. I think there's everything we do too. Like, there's a lot of projects that I love over the years that we've had a lot of feedback in, things like the breadcrumbs and the D key shortcut to like bring them to your mouse.
Yeah.
The S key, the shortcut toolbars, again, comes up at your mouse. Like those mouse gestures, command search, all those things have been refined over the years based on watching people, understanding what they're doing, and trying to kind of design for expertise, right? So you talked earlier about like watching somebody their first time through the software. One of the things I talk about a lot is like we have certain goals with SolidWorks, or we want to be like easy to get started, easy to install it, easy to get it set up. Easy to do the first thing you want to do with it. Get in there, get your first part going, but also easy to kind of climb that learning curve, right? Easy to be an expert, or easy to become an expert. And so, the experience of someone who's brand new and needs a lot of help is going to be a lot different than someone who's customized everything on their machine. They've got all the mouse gestures set up, they've got all their keyboard things set up, they've got their space mouse, and they're in the zone cranking, 40 plus hours a week, and they're in optimizing mode, right? So we take a lot of this and we try to do the same thing to set things up for people that really want to optimize their experience and go fast, right? I think that sets us apart a little bit too, in terms of software. Like I get frustrated at other tools that I use sometimes because I'm like, man, I want to be faster at this, or I want to automate this, or I want to add that to the keyboard, and you can't always do it. So that's another thing we look at pretty closely in SolidWorks.
It's a great point. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, I think we all have that experience whenever, and I think whenever we use any software package. But I like you said, I think it really, for me at least, it does help me to build a sense of empathy, right? Because it's like you think to yourself, because there are a lot of lessons surely there, like even using other software packages where it's translatable, right? It's like, okay, well, how much does it matter to me working on this software package that I be able to do something that is universal, right? Like you said, like maybe applying keyboard shortcuts, or accessing a menu option in a predictable or sort of seamless way if I need to, if I don't know exactly where it is already. Like you said, in a SolidWorks context, SolidWorks user context, you can almost tell, if the command manager is super customized and, the S key bar has like a bunch of stuff in it. It's like, well, you probably know what you're doing. Like,
yep.
It's somewhat predictable in that way. And the S key is actually a great example, and one that I just wanted to mention some things on, even in what's new. That's an area that's kind of beautiful because you can, like you said, it's right by your mouse. You press the S key right by your mouse. There's context appropriate commands that come up. Now we have the command search right there as well, which is awesome, right next to your mouse. And then you can also you can drag commands right onto the S key for future use. The little toolbar menu, you can press the little I, so it shows you where the command is, outside of the S key menu. It's interesting to kind of navigate the challenge of adding more useful functionality in that very simple and elegant space without overpopulating it and making it, sort of kludgy. It's a very interesting challenge to have to face.
Yeah, and I mean, for that one we've gone slow, right? And so I think a lot of people didn't realize that, I think since we introduced the S key, there was the ability to, like, if you hit S, you could just start typing and use command search. Like it had like dual focus. And most people didn't realize that was there. So like after a couple of years, we said, okay, let's add it to the S key itself. We did a lot of testing to understand if that was going to get annoying, but for that same purpose, right? We don't want to overload things and turn a good thing into a crappy thing because
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That is, yes, that is a problem. People have said throughout time, making something easy, making something simple is not not always an easy process. Like that can sometimes be the hardest thing to do. So it's cool that we keep that top of mind. And in terms of challenges, these days, right, we've talked about some of the history of different developments, how we take in feedback. And you guys in the chat, again, if you have any questions, feel free to shout them out. We'll get into some Ask Me Anything questions that we got from 3D Swim in just a bit from our user community. But what are some of the biggest UX challenges that you and your team are trying to solve? And really, I guess what's kind of been top of mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think a lot of, like I said before, it's the complex kind of multimodal problems that are the biggest things, right? And so, SolidWorks is a mature product at this point, right? So I think the biggest one is when we add stuff, make sure that it's useful and valuable and not screwing people up, right? Like we don't want to ruin something that works really well and is really awesome and is really well loved by going overboard, going crazy. So we need to make sure that we kind of temper what we're doing. And then I think too, like every year people try to do bigger assemblies, bigger drawings, more, right? You're kind of, that's kind of like human nature, right? We're, we went to the moon, let's go to Mars now. So, those, like I said before, with, the assembly loading stuff, it's trying to solve those bigger problems in an elegant way for people so that they don't get in the way, right? Like, the large design review stuff and assembly loading is a good example of, we want to do it with a light touch so that you almost don't even notice that it's happening until you absolutely need to, right? And so those are harder problems. Those are really difficult problems because it's not like I can just go and ask somebody the right way to do it, right? We have to talk to a lot of customers. We have to kind of figure out what they're doing. We have to gain insight. We have to talk to the dev team and understand what's possible. We have to coordinate with our sister team in product definition to understand, the kind of functional challenges to figure out the right way to do it, the how to do it. So I think those are the big ones. I think too, we talk, as we're integrating more with the platform and trying to unlock some of the great features and functions of our sister brands, and like, how do we make it seamless, right? You're going from people that are used to working with Windows and browse to, a database system that's based on search and has different ways of organizing things. So, we're trying to figure out good ways to help ease that transition because there's a lot of amazing power that's available to our customers, but we need to make sure that we bring them to it in a way that makes them feel comfortable and, so they can see that value. They can experience that value and they don't have to deal with the pain of thinking in a different way than they're used to thinking. So those are the big ones, I think.
You mentioned, it's an interesting time, right? Because we're talking about different areas, like you said, all the SolidWorks products. There's a lot of power, right, with 3D Experience and other brands and the software they're developing, that can help SolidWorks users. But I guess from your perspective, how is the UX team like able to handle like its time and its resources when it comes to even just if you consider SolidWorks Desktop and 3D Experience SolidWorks?
Well, I mean, John Sweeney made a good point last time too, and I guess this is me plugging watching old episodes, but
well, if you're gonna watch an old episode, the What's New episode from like 3 weeks ago, like
okay,
it's still good.
Ancient history, but it's a good point. So the team working on connected versus the team working on desktop, it's the same team, right? It's the same software right up to the line of when there are different pieces of code that have to be a little different, right? So, Priya Delmi is the kind of the UX design lead for SolidWorks Desktop, or what we know as SolidWorks Desktop, but her team's also covering the connected stuff, right? It's the same CAD software, Phil, it's the same, all those things are the same. It's just that there's some subtle differences get in when we start dealing with the data management side of like how things get loaded up to the platform, how you search for things, how you find things. But what we found, I mean, over the years, we've done a lot of stuff that goes back and forth and we kind of cross-pollinate anyway, right? So breadcrumbs were not a SolidWorks desktop team, UI innovation, right? That started with,
I did not realize that.
That was something we stole from, I think it was Mechanical Conceptual at the time, the thing that kind of became XApps. So we kind of took it and made it better, made it our own, right? And there's always kind of pollination there, right? We're kind of swapping things back and forth, improving them. We see like, oh, that development team did this. That's interesting. Let's take that. I mean, we can do that because it's all the same company. So the team is the same. However, there are other folks, right? So I have another group of folks that look at those kind of like data workflows about save, open, new, insert, and how they work on the platform and how they work in XApps. We also integrate with the team that does like 3D search, that does bookmarks and Innovia. So we have the same core team working on SolidWorks, then we bring in lots of other designers from within our team, and then within some of the other bigger teams or other outside teams at DS, further specialization when we need them. So it's a big collaboration, but in the end, right, like the CAD product is the same exact CAD product, right? It's just there are some places where it differs, and so we bring in the right expertise when we need to there.
I liked how you said it earlier too, like it just right up to a line, right? Like right up to a line.
And then over the line, we step over that line all the time. Yeah. But I mean, I think there's some good examples too of like, we're doing things in connected to try to integrate, bookmarks and 3D search right into things like the welcome dialog, that open dialog that you get when you launch SolidWorks. So again, there's lots of stuff going back and forth between SolidWorks desktop and that piece in connected, that workflow in connected. And so we're making improvements back and forth there. Again, just, I think we're getting better having thought about the problem from a different perspective. So then we get that benefit for everybody.
Very cool. So I do want to get to some of our AMA questions. We're inching closer to the top of the hour here, but this one I think came originally from the SolidWorks Champions community. So it reads, let's see here. How does the UX team at SolidWorks work with the overall 3D Experience UX teams? So I guess kind of going off of your question or your answer actually just from just now.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing is we're a big team, and we have a pretty well-defined process, and we've got pretty good results over the years. So in a way, we do end up leading the way when it comes to other UX teams and even some of the other 3D Experience UX teams. So, a great example of one of the ways that we worked together is a couple of years ago. Actually, well, it was in the last few FDs, they released what they called lifelike search, right? So there's kind of, if you do search on the platform or in connected now, you'll see there's a band that comes across the bottom with who, what, where, why. And so it kind of lets you get that first level of tagging and federation in your search right away. So you can start to filter right away once you search for something. And so, when they first had that, they came to us and they said, hey, can you guys help us usability test this with SolidWorks customers? So I said, sure. So we went out and found a bunch of people, did some usability testing with them, came back and said, hey, people think this is awesome, but there's a couple things that, we really need to smooth out with it before we ship it. And they jumped all over it. They were super excited. And they made a bunch of improvements based on, what the SolidWorks customers were doing. That's a DS kind of platform team, the 3D search team that engaged with us there. So there's a lot that goes back and forth at 3D Experience World. We usually have quite a few guests with us. So the UX team from Simulia usually comes and does some testing with us. The Innovia folks come and do it. So they've done some stuff with bookmarks. They've done some stuff with a variety of their platform apps that, they wanted that SolidWorks customer perspective. There's the Delmia Works that are like used to be IQMS. They also come and test with us. So there's a lot of other teams that we coordinate with and work with to kind of, A, set a good example, B, help them use some of our processes that we use, like we have a pretty mature user testing setup. So we want to help them do as much as possible there. And then we benefit a lot from it too, right? They have design systems, they have components pre-built that we can use. And so we grab that stuff as much as possible. So it's like having a much bigger team than we actually do, because we can bring in that expertise when we need it.
Very cool. Very cool. So this next question, so this is from John Matrician. So John intimated here, there are a lot of areas SolidWorks R&D seems to be working on these days, like on desktop, connected to the 3D experience, etc. How does SolidWorks user experience bridge into each different area? Yeah, I guess it's interesting because even thinking about like the X apps too, it's a lot of different areas than just like we said earlier, just the SolidWorks product, like just the desktop products anymore.
Yep.
So I curious about how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely have our noses in a lot of different things, right? So we do have dedicated teams for desktop, for X apps, CAD. Many of you guys know Chinlu Lama. She runs a UX team that's kind of focused on, we've struggled with what to name it, but it's like collaboration, community, and visualization, right? So, they've done various things over the years, including, they're working on VR stuff. Chinlu's been engaged with the team that makes Swim lately. So we've been working very closely with that team to try to help them understand what our users' needs are. So with trying to do the SolidWorks user forum through Swim, like what are the things that we need to do to effectively run that forum? So I think, the community tags came out, they delivered that, I think in FD04, 22x FD04. So that idea of like tagging and being able to break up a Swim community into those kind of like channels, like, hey, I'm interested in assemblies, I'm interested in parts and features, I'm interested in drawings, that stuff, came through our collaboration with those teams. So yeah, we have our fingers in a lot of pies, to use a weird analogy. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is, like I mentioned before, we often, if something's important, we often get consulted on it just because we have that, it's really amazing. And it's another plug for signing up to do usability testing with us is, because we have that ready group of people that can come and give feedback pretty much whenever, we make it easy to do that, right? We can make decisions based on data and, user feedback, which is better than just making stuff up. So
yeah, making stuff up usually comes back to bite me at
yeah.
least.
I mean, well, and so I shouldn't say it that way. Like people are making educated guesses based on their expertise and what they know about the users. But I used to use this quote when I was a consultant all the time. It's like users will fail in ways you never expected, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the user. It means that whatever you did design wise, you didn't account. There's no way you can account for everything, right? So it's better to just be humble, realize you don't know, and let the people that are going to use it, help you make the right decision. So that's one of the great benefits of the relationships we have with customers.
Totally. So this next question submitted through 3D Swim through Todd Blackshear. How is the UX team aiming to ensure that the experience or feel between 3D Experience SolidWorks and SolidWorks Desktop are as close to the same as possible?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to what John said, right? The teams are the same, the product's the same as much as it can be. So, right up to that line of like, okay, now I'm saving this, out to the 3D Experience platform. Obviously, some things the workflows are going to be different. Those things are going to be different. But at the same time, we are working on those workflows together, right? So as we're changing that welcome screen or that save dialog for SolidWorks Connected, or making some improvements to it for SolidWorks Connected, we're thinking about how that process works for SolidWorks Desktop and seeing like, okay, how can we change this as well, right? We're seeing benefits from adjusting how we do things. How can we make sure that kind of flows back through everybody, right? Yeah, I mean, there's definitely new ways of thinking about some behaviors and some things that have been in SolidWorks for a long, long time, right? I think Mark Johnson, one of our, expert tech support guys, he always gives an example of like, I think one of his presentations is like, how many ways can you open a file in SolidWorks? And I think at last count, we were at 19. It's amazing, right? So yeah, there's always room for improvement. There's always room for streamlining. There's always room for doing things a little bit better. So I think in some ways we're thinking about old problems in new ways. And so there's benefit to be gained across the board. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge. Sometimes I feel like, we're placing seams, right? Like, okay, here's one product and we're going to add this other product to it. And in some cases, yeah, it feels like that. And in a lot of cases, it feels like it makes us think differently. We find a way to make both products better than they would have been beforehand. So I think that's a big benefit of it.
Very cool. Well, so that does it for our AMA questions from 3D Swim, and we're at about the top of the hour. That went quick.
Yeah.
I could have. I was biting my tongue at the end because I was looking at the clock. I was like, we could just talk about this stuff for hours. But thank you so much, Kevin, for jumping on with us on SolidWorks Live. And I mean, even for me, I work here, right? Like educating us on a lot of how the software comes to be with, of course, the help of our users. And on that note, as we leave off, what are some of the best ways that our community can get involved with user experience at SolidWorks?
I mean, the number one way is to sign up for usability with us, right? So go to that solidworks.com/usability. There's a little survey there that helps us understand how you use the software. And, as we're looking to test things, we reach out. As we're looking to understand, more about certain types of workflows or certain industries, we reach out, right? So we drive a lot of what we do. Like, hopefully what I've described to you is like this big machine of taking user feedback and turning it into, a better piece of software. And it all starts with, let's use a farming analogy, that harvest of information from our customers, before we can bake it into something great that is SolidWorks. So I think that's the number one way. If you see us out in a user group, or you see us in a webinar like this, or a live content session like this,
like whatever this thing's called,
reach out, engage. Yeah, I mean, everybody on my team loves talking about the product. They love talking to customers. I think many of us, that's why we work here, is because that part is the best part, right? Hearing people get excited about what they're making, hearing people get excited about how SolidWorks makes that go better in some way, hearing about how we, have made it worse in some way, and oh my God, we should go back and fix this as fast as possible. Like, those things motivate us. That's the emotional paycheck that, keeps us here and makes us want to work on this amazing piece of software. So yeah, we're here. Call us.
Yeah, I can't say this. Just some other anecdotes to support some of the things you mentioned. Obviously I still have a very close tie with the SolidWorks Champions program, having created it. So I jump in on the meetings, and I was coincidentally on one. I think Matt Clegg, who runs the Champions program today, runs them, I think, bi-weekly, every other week. And Hannah and Tal from your team were both on, and we're on Zoom and asking users questions, and just getting feedback and making connections. It requires such an interest and a ceaseless, sense of curiosity. I think at one point Hannah was even on there just asking users like, what do you think coding is? Like when you think of coding, what does that mean to you? I'm not even sure if that was work related in that sense. But well, it's just like, what's that?
Said you'd be surprised. Yeah, honestly, I mean, a couple of years ago, we were talking about furniture and we made a prototype, this little prototype that people click through to make a birdhouse, a wooden birdhouse. And people are like, what are you doing? This is weird. And,
okay. So I'd be
now,
really
right. So part of Home by Me, there's a product that we have called Make by Me that's like DIY furniture design. And it's actually really cool. We've learned a lot from doing that, like, lifelike interactions of how to make cuts, how to mate things in 3D space. Like when you're not like, mates are kind of an engineering concept, right? You have to think a certain way. And so how do you do that for somebody that doesn't know anything about engineering? Like, how do you snap things together in 3D space and get them to work the way you want? So, yeah, I mean, that's a product now, right? That started with a weird conversation about a birdhouse that we were like, why are we, and people would look at it like, okay, that's weird. I'm not mass producing birdhouses, but now it's actually a pretty cool little furniture design thing, and you can put your stuff into your Home by Me apartment or house layout. So yeah, you never know what we're going to talk about.
So what you're saying is what started out as a prototype for Birdhouse Express became Home by Me. That's very cool.
Well, it's part of Home by Me. I think it's Make by Me is what we're calling it now, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, once again, Kevin, thank you so much. Make sure you follow Kevin's advice. Go to solidworks.com/usability. If you're registering for 3D Experience World 2023, which you can today, if you're planning on attending virtually or if you're planning on going in person, there are user experience involvement opportunities for you there. Just make sure to hit the checkbox for usability testing, and you can reach out, right? Just like we see here on the screen at usability-ux@solidworks.com. But yeah, once again, Kevin, thank you so much for jumping on SolidWorks Live.
Yeah, awesome. It was fun. I didn't have my hands everywhere this time, so I feel like I
Yep. It was in the last 5 years or so, you've gotten a lot better at this. So I appreciate your time, man.
It's good when my kids view this later, they won't make fun of me as much.
Glad to be a part of that. All right, man. See you soon.
All right, take it easy. Thank you.
All right. So thank you to Kevin once again for being our guest on this first of its kind behind the SolidWorks scenes episode. Give a +1 if you're on LinkedIn or on YouTube for Kevin here and the whole UX team. Hey, hope you enjoyed this special edition of SolidWorks Live, this video podcast, right? Remember, subscribe now. It's just a click away. That'll keep you up to speed on all the upcoming episodes of our live streaming programs, including SolidWorks Live, right? Which we run all different types of ways, right? Throughout, every month. Every month we have a new episode. Last month we had a bunch of different guests on from the industry process consulting team and the SolidWorks R&D teams talking about what's new in SolidWorks 2023. You can check out the replays on LinkedIn and YouTube. But again, if you subscribe, you get access to all of the new episodes. So speaking of, we will be live once again here on the SolidWorks YouTube channel at noon Eastern with live designs. We're going to have Kate Reed on, who's an outstanding artist, outstanding maker. And Kate's going to be showing how she's merged the power of these three things, which are super impressive and powerful, right? Nature, technology, and design to make some natural creations using algorithms that are found in nature. So using SolidWorks tools like XDesign and XShape, as well as algorithmic design tools like XGenerative Design, Kate's able to make pieces that I can say at least they really have expanded my mind to help me see what's possible through the power of combining these three things. So Kate's going to be on for about an hour showing her screen with host Andy Barnes. And then we're going to be back with our other program, Manufacturing Live, on November 15th, when our team checks in with multi-time guest Jeff Holfelt. I might remember Jeff from 3D Experience World this past year. Jeff's a person who's had all sorts of roles in the manufacturing industry, and today Jeff's the VP at Northern Industrial Manufacturing. And we're going to be discussing with Jeff Industry 4.0, hot topic, right? And the creative steps that his company is taking to recruit and retain the next generation of talent within the manufacturing industry, which is always a hot topic. So thank you all. Thank you to our production crew, especially special shout out, by the way, to Lissa Winslow, who's done a fantastic job over the years bringing you Slug Me. If you like Slug Me 6, Slug Me 7, Lissa was a big part of that behind the scenes. SolidWorks World, 3D Experience World, and of course, right here we are, SolidWorks Live every month. So thank you so much to Lissa for all your efforts over the years. Couldn't have done it without you. And thank you to our marketing team and all of you, our audience, our users, our community. Thank you so much for tuning in with us, and we will see you next time. Take care.